tethered by a rope. As a baby, this elephant is tired and told not to move. The elephant simply obeys and grows up believing that it doesn't have the strength to break the rope and go beyond this assigned area. This is also the same kind of social conditioning with which many young girls are brought up, with society being the imaginary rope that is holding them back. Hashtag Ab Samjhauta Nahi or No More Compromise is an initiative by Vivel to empower young people by making them aware of their legal rights. Vivel as a brand calls upon women to uncondition themselves against society's expectations and break stereotypes to let their own voices be heard. In today's workshop, we will be covering many important laws and social issues such as fundamental rights, gender equality, sexual harassment, cyber safety, consent, and more. So, why this workshop becomes so important for male allies too, or even those who aren't really sure of what feminism stands for, is that men too are victims of patriarchy. Patriarchy also teaches men not to cry like a girl, to be the main breadwinner of a family, and be the most assertive in the household. It is because of this that a power imbalance emerges. There are several prominent male feminists, such as Baba Saheb Ambedkar, who fought a scheme of gender equality to our constitution, Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, who speaks as a feminist in his judgments and otherwise, and also Mahavir Singh Fogart, who belongs to a small village in Haryana, who trained his daughters against all odds to become world-class wrestlers. To make sure you learn from the best, we have with us Ms. Karuna Nandi. She is an advocate at the Supreme Court of India and an international human rights lawyer who has been working to safeguard the rights of the people. She is also one of the experts who helped in drafting the anti-rape law amendments post the Nirbhaya case.
Hello, my name is Karuna Nandi. Growing up, I never thought I would have to face such a deeply gendered, sexist world. We make the best of it, and we ignore glass ceilings, we break them, we work around them. Across generations, though, this is something that still remains. I became a lawyer because law codifies real power for change. Today, we will learn to use this power. Power for women, and when we speak of women, we refer to all those who identify as women or are treated as women. We speak also of how queer folk and male allies can use this power. Today, in this workshop, we seek to help you become an agent of justice. In relationships, knowing our rights and how we are protected by civil and criminal law can help us negotiate power better and strengthen us to claim our freedom. In law, knowing and using your power to navigate the police and the courts gives you the tools to fight your own battles and become an agent of justice. By using the law, you, in small ways and large, transform the system. Not just for yourself, not just for ourselves, but also for others. Our rights begin with the Constitution of India. Governments exist to ensure these: the right to life and dignity, the right to freedom of expression, the right to equality. These apply to all genders. Now let's bring them home to women and queer folk. So Article 21 is the right to personal liberty. It means that the state has the duty to ensure that no person is deprived of the right to lead a life of dignity, from the right to bodily integrity to the right to food and privacy, to the right to shelter for a woman, regardless of her marital status, and her right to be able to travel freely, say in public transport, without the fear of being violated. That is all under Article 21. Under Article 19, every woman has the right to free speech, the right to her voice, the right to express sexual autonomy, including with respect to her choice of partners of any gender. She also has the right to marry any person of her choice and be regarded as an equal partner in the marriage. She is entitled to have rights in case of separation, divorce, and annulment of marriage. Every woman under Article 14 has the right to equality before the law and equal protection of all the laws. This means that a woman has equal right to inheritance, land, and financial and other resources. No traditional religious or customary practice can impair the dignity of a woman. There must never be differential treatment, unequal treatment in access to education, employment opportunities only because a person is a woman. Now moving to the important and quite interesting topic of gender and identity. Let's play a game. So this is called Gender Bias Bingo. Who scored the first double century in ODI cricket? Was it Sachin Tendulkar, Belinda Clark, or was it MS Dhoni? This person was taught to cook and wash utensils at a very young age. Today, they are a renowned chef and have cooked for Barack Obama, PM Modi, the Dalai Lama, many more. Born into a Dalit family, this person was married off at the age of 12. Today, they are the founder of a real estate business, own personal assets worth $112 million, and have been felicitated with the Padma Shri. Is it Dilip Shangvi, Kalpana Saroj, or Milind Kamble? Who was the first ever Indian to win an Oscar? Was it A.R. Rahman, Bhanu Athaiya, or Rasool Pookutti? We're placed in artificial boxes, so anybody may like to ride a bike or cook. You can't simply guess the gender of a person by hearing just a few of their characteristics or even seeing them. Let's understand the concept of gender through the gender-bred person. There are 4 aspects: identity, orientation, sex, and expression. Gender identity refers to how one thinks about oneself. Does one think of oneself as man, as a woman, as gender queer, as fluid? Gender expression. How do you demonstrate your gender through the ways you act, dress, behave, and interact? Are you predominantly feminine or masculine? Are you androgynous? Are you slightly feminine? Are you sometimes feminine, sometimes masculine? Biological sex. The anatomy of an individual's reproductive system is also on a spectrum. One could be born as a male, a female, or intersex. Sexual orientation. Who are you physically and emotionally attracted to based on their sex or gender? So are you heterosexual? Are you homosexual? Are you bisexual? Are you pansexual? Are you asexual? Are you not attracted to anyone? LGBTQIA stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual. But these are not the only categories. It's LGBTQIA+. Because it's important to remember that sometimes people identify as one thing, but there are many other things, experiences of sexuality and identity that people have that may not be expressed in a neat category in this way. So what's a lesbian? Most people know what a lesbian is. If I as a woman am only sexually attracted to other women, then I'd be a lesbian. The word gay is often used for homosexual men. Bisexual is individuals who are attracted to men and women. Transgender means that if you are born with particular biological parts but identify with the gender that is not associated with those parts. For example, if you are born with a penis and identify as a woman, or if you are born with a vagina and identify as a man. The word queer I like a lot. It comes to some extent from the French thinker Foucault, the ideas that it's based on. And the Indian movements have really embraced this word and the idea, and it's very inclusive. The idea being that I may be attracted to anyone, but that identity is not fixed. And those choices are not necessarily fixed. That my identity may be fluid and my sexuality may be fluid. Intersex means that I may not be born with either a vagina or a penis, but different reproductive and biological parts. And asexual means not being attracted sexually to anybody. Are people from the LGBT plus community protected by the law in India? Select yes, no, or in theory on the Zoom poll. So the people who selected in theory, I think, are the most right. The law is meant to protect genderqueer, androgynous and intersex identity and behavior. The Supreme Court in Nalsa versus the Union of India declared transgender people to be a third gender and affirmed that the fundamental rights granted under the Constitution will not only be equally applicable to transgender people, but that it will address the particular needs and rights of transgender people that are different from the rights of people who are not transgender, cisgender. People like me, for instance, I'm cisgender because I was born with particular biology and identify with the gender identity of a woman, which is most frequently associated with that. Now, it gives them the right to self-identification of their gender as male, female, or third gender. However, in practice, much of these rights have not been fully realized and we have a long way to go. Section 377, a lot of people celebrated the Supreme Court verdict in 2018. A 5-judge constitutional bench of the Supreme Court decriminalized homosexuality by partially striking down, getting rid of, the colonial era provisions of Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code. The court said that the section would not apply to same-sex acts between heterosexuals, homosexuals, and other sexual minorities that were consensual, but that this would apply to bestiality, the abuse of animals, and sexual acts without consent. Let's look at some landmark judicial decisions. The Navdeep Johar case that struck down Section 377 of the Penal Code was a landmark judgment. Here are a few other landmark cases that are rewriting history for a safer and more equal society. As we go along, we'll also take a look at the various kinds of offences that are punishable under the criminal law in India. On the 16th of December of 2012, not far from here, a brutal case of gang rape and murder shocked this entire country. A 23-year-old was assaulted and raped in a bus by 6 men, and then her body was thrown on the road. Out of the 6 men, 5 were adults and 1 was a 17-year-old. The Juvenile Justice Act of 2000 was amended to provide that a person between the ages of 16 and 18 years could be tried as an adult if he or she had committed any heinous crimes. This includes for men statutory rape. So the age of legally valid consent to sexual activity was, however, increased to 18. So if 2 17-year-olds in love had intercourse, for example, consensual intercourse, the boy would be tried as an adult because the girl would not be deemed to have given consent. Major changes were also brought in the criminal law as a result of this case, a lot of which I was involved in drafting. Before discussing what some of these changes are, let's look at how the basics of this law works in this area. The various kinds of offences that we will be referring to and discussing as we go along, we will explain. This will help you deal with the situation if either you, a friend, or a relative are dealing with such an unpleasant situation. What are cognizable and non-cognizable, bailable and non-bailable offences? A cognizable offence is one where the police can arrest without permission from a magistrate. A non-cognizable offence is an offence that a police cannot arrest for immediately. A bailable or a non-bailable offence is the difference between bail being a matter of right and during the trial or during the case, the person cannot be kept in custody and no fetters on their liberty can be placed even by a judge. In a non-bailable offence, bail can still be given, but it has to be given by a judge. It's not a matter of right. A judge can decide whether, on balance, bail should be given to the particular accused or not be given. And even if bail is given, particular conditions can be given. For example, you have to report to the police station, or you can't come within a few kilometers of a particular person, etc. So with this knowledge, let's look at some particular provisions, some sections of the criminal law that came into India after the Nirbhaya mass protests. Section 354A to Section 354D were added to the Indian Penal Code. Section 354A sets out instances of sexual harassment of a woman by a man that are punishable. Now, these include instances that we may very well brush aside. We may not view them as punishable. These, in fact, are. For instance, a man is guilty of sexual harassment if he makes sexually colored remarks without consent, or if he makes explicit sexual overtures, demands or requests for sexual favors, or even if he shows a woman porn against her will. These are cognizable and bailable offences. Now remember, cognizable means that a person can be arrested, but after the arrest, they cannot be kept in police custody or they cannot be kept in jail until the trial is over. If they're convicted, of course, they go to jail. Section 354B, if a man assaults or uses force on a woman with the intent to disrobe her, take her clothes off, or compels her to be naked, then that is cognizable and non-bailable with a maximum of 7 years imprisonment. In this country, there is a particularly violent tradition of this happening in caste situations, particularly against Dalit women. Of course, the SC/ST Act will also come in there. Section 354C, voyeurism. If a man watches or captures images of a woman engaging in a private act, for example, where she has the reasonable expectation of being alone, such a man is guilty of an offence punishable with a maximum of 7 years in prison. This is cognizable and bailable, which means that the person can be arrested, but this person cannot be detained in police custody or in jail. Now this is important. Section 354D, stalking, in person or cyber stalking. If a man follows a woman or contacts her for personal interaction, despite a clear indication of disinterest by such a woman, or if he monitors her online activity, then such a man can be held guilty of stalking. Now remember that there was a debate in Parliament when these anti-rape laws were tabled, and people essentially said that ये तो रोजमर्रा की बात है, ये तो हम कॉलेज में करते थे, right? And that is the point at which this offence was made bailable at the first accusation. So what happens? How does this work? Man follows you home repeatedly. He keeps following you home. He says that he will throw acid on your face. Section 503, Section 506, he's threatening you, right? He is clearly stalking you. You go to the police. You summon up the courage, you go to the police. And the police says, we can arrest him, but you know what? We're going to have to release him on bail. You then go to the magistrate. You say you go to the Mahila court. And you know what the court will say? The court will say, I would love to. The court might say, I would love to protect you, but I can't because my hands are tied. This is a bailable offence. There is a bill that Shashi Tharoor and I and a number of other people are working on with the Quint. The draft was placed before the Home Minister, and to make this offence non-bailable at the first instance. Now, just remember that non-bailable does not mean that the person will definitely be kept in jail or be kept in police custody. It just means that the magistrate has the option. And it means that the magistrate, even if she doesn't want to keep the person in custody, can say, look, don't go within 2 kilometers of her house or within 2 kilometers of her college. Otherwise, as I said, the magistrate's hands are tied. Now, there is a way around this. There are offences under the IT Act that are often committed at the same time that should be cited in an FIR with a stalking complaint if such activity has happened in the context of that particular crime. So Section 67A criminalize sexually explicit and obscene pictures shared electronically and are non-bailable offences. The definition of rape was also amended after the Nirbhaya case, and as per the current definition, rape is not restricted to only penile vaginal penetration. It includes the penetration of a penis into the mouth of the woman or making her do the same act with another person. It includes inserting any object into her vagina or anus, applying the aggressor applying his mouth to the vagina without her consent. This is also rape. So the punishment of rape is a minimum of 7 years, and in some cases it's the death penalty. It is higher in cases of gang rape or rape by a person in a position of authority. The Mathura rape case was an incident of custodial rape in March 1972. Mathura, a young tribal girl, was raped by 2 policemen at a police station in Maharashtra. That's what she had said. Let me now play a video for us to better understand this case.
I continue to be shocked at the language of the judgment. So the Sessions Court dismissed Mathura as a shocking liar whose testimony is riddled with falsehood and improbabilities, and that it came to the conclusion that she had sexual intercourse at the police station. She was habituated to sexual intercourse and found that her fiancé or her husband was angry with her, and that's how she wanted to sound virtuous. And the Supreme Court came to the conclusion that there were no marks of injuries found on the person of the girl after the incident, and their absence goes a long way to indicate that the alleged intercourse was a peaceful affair, and that the story of a stiff resistance having been put up by her is all false.
It was the pressure of movements, women's movements, that led to parliamentary reform. India is said to be young, and it is young, then the young people's duty, passion, must be to cleanse Indian society and culture of the thief.
After the Supreme Court acquitted the accused policeman in the Mathura rape case, there was huge public outcry and protests. As a result of this, our politicians were forced to bring changes in the Indian evidence law and the penal code in the year 1983. So what's the law now? Under Section 114A of the Evidence Act, the law now says that once it is proven that there was sexual intercourse by the accused and the prosecutrix, the woman who's complaining, and the question that remains to be proven is one of whether there was consent by the victim. The law now says that if the victim categorically tells the court that she didn't consent, then the court can rely on that evidence. It must take that evidence extremely seriously and presume, in fact, that there was no consent unless the cross-examination displaces that presumption, or unless the judge asks questions and the witness is no longer consistent, unless there is other evidence that comes in to demonstrate that what the prosecutrix was saying was not true. It was through this amendment in the law in 1983 that the concept of custodial rape, that is, rape by a police personnel, was recognized. Rape by a police officer has a higher penal consequence with a minimum sentence of 10 years. It was in the same year that the law was amended to provide for proceedings of such nature to take place in private, so without the presence of the public, and there was also another provision brought in to keep the identity of the victim private. So if anyone prints or publishes the name or any related details through which the identity of the victim may be known, that is a criminal offence under the Penal Code per section 228A. So in no circumstances can the identity of a rape victim be disclosed. It's therefore illegal to post pictures and videos of women who have been subjected to rape online for the purpose of revenge or silencing them. That offence is cognizable, it is also bailable. Here it's also important to mention that rape threats are also a punishable offence under the Penal Code. Under Section 503, women are so often subjected to violent intimidation in the form of rape threats. This is a non-cognizable and bailable offence. Under Section 507, rape threats and other forms of violent forcing, where the person forcing you is a stranger, that can fall under this section. That is non-cognizable and it's bailable. So let's come to a different kind of threat. Sexual harassment used to be, believe it or not, perfectly legal until the Supreme Court in the Vishakha case laid down guidelines and said that sexual harassment at the workplace must be dealt with by officers, by any workplace, in a manner that protects women workers. Who brought us these rights to be free of sexual harassment? In 1992, Bhavri Devi was brutally gang raped because of her work as a sathin in Rajasthan to prevent a child marriage.
अरे मारा कूटर फिर पाछा 3 जना तो पकड़ लिया हमारा आदमी ने 2 मारा साथ में से ये बुरा
उन बेशरम पुलिस वालों ने भंवरी का घाघरा वहीं उतरवा लिया। अब आप सोचो, उसको दूसरा घाघरा तो दिया नहीं, फिर भंवरी के पति ने पगड़ी अपनी उतारी और एक लुंगी नुमा भंवरी ने बांधा।
छोटी बच्ची की 9 महीना की बच्ची की जान तो बचाई थी।
और सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने जो PIL हमारी स्वीकार की और उससे पूरे देश का एक गाइडलाइंस बनी, जैसे हम कार्यस्थल पर यौन हिंसा रोकने की गाइडलाइंस है, और वो आज 2013 में 23 अप्रैल को कानून बन गया। तो मैं ये मानती हूँ कि ये सबसे बड़ी सफलता है।
Pavri Devi did not get complete justice in her own case. However, guidelines to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace set out by the Supreme Court defined sexual harassment, and they set out requirements for employers to follow to address sexual harassment in the workplace, to prevent it, to punish it. In the judgment, the Supreme Court asked Parliament to make a comprehensive law to prevent and punish sexual harassment. It took 16 years. Finally, in 2013, Parliament passed the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013. हेलो, मेरा नाम करुणा नंदी है। हम एक कोशिश कर रहे हैं जिसमें कानून के मेन उसूल एनिमेशन के तौर से हम दिखाएं और कानून लागू कैसे होता है। किस्सा ऑफिस का, और ये है डेजी, मैनेजर की सेक्रेटरी है। उसका बॉस अक्सर उसके सामने सेक्सुअल जोक्स मारता है, बड़ा अजीब लगता है उसे।
चलो मैं तुम्हें घर छोड़ देता हूँ।
नो थैंक यू।
कम ऑन डार्लिंग, अगर अपनी नौकरी से प्यार है तो जैसा मैं कहता हूँ वैसा करो।
उसके कंधों पर मसाज देने लगता है डेजी हैरान। ये सब सहने की किसी को भी जरूरत नहीं, ना जोक्स, ना जायज छूना, ना सताना। हर दफ्तर, हर फैक्ट्री, हर दुकान, हर कार्यस्थल, अगर 10 एम्प्लॉइज हैं, छेड़छाड़ की जांच के लिए कानूनन एक कमेटी होनी जरूरी है। हिना के पति एजाज का गुस्सा बड़ा तेज है। रोज घर लौटकर तोड़फोड़ मचाता है। एजाज हिना को पीटकर बेडरूम में ले जाता है, जोर जबरदस्ती करता है। हिना हिंसा की शिकार है, फिलहाल शादी नहीं तोड़ना चाहती। है एक रास्ता। घरेलू हिंसा कानून के तहत हिना को उस घर में रहने का अधिकार है, खर्चे पर अधिकार है, एजाज को मारने से रोकने का अधिकार है। स्वाति की शादी हो रही है, मेहंदी बड़ी अच्छी रची, माँ बाप से बड़ा भारी दहेज लिया गया। ये रहा पहला अपराध। फिर भी ससुराल वालों की मांगे खत्म नहीं होती। शादी के बाद उसकी सास दहेज के लिए उसे मारने लगी। उसका पति भी उसे रोज मारता पीटता था। एक दिन स्वाति ने FIR दर्ज कर ही दिया। दहेज का भार गायब। रानी प्रेग्नेंट है, मां बनने की खुशी है उसे। हॉस्पिटल में चेकअप कराने आई तो पति जानना चाहता है लड़का है या लड़की। फोर्स कर रहा है उसे। पता चला बेटी होने वाली है।
तू डॉक्टर को बोल कि तुझे ये बच्चा नहीं चाहिए और इसे अभी के अभी गिरा दे।
मत होने दो ऐसा, कानूनी अपराध है, जेल हो सकती है। पल्लवी के पापा गुजर गए। उसके 2 भाई राज और धीरज प्रॉपर्टी को आपस में बांटने की बात कर रहे हैं।
प्रॉपर्टी पर हक सिर्फ बेटों का होता है।
गलत है ये, गैर कानूनी। कानून की मदद ली पल्लवी ने। माँ बाप की प्रॉपर्टी पर पल्लवी का है पूरा हक, उतना जितना राज का, जितना धीरज का। अब उसने अपना ब्यूटी पार्लर खोल लिया। तरक्की बड़ी हो रही है। माँ उसके साथ है। So, which laws will help us end the everyday inequality around us? Let's discuss one very important law that's also referred to in the video. The Sexual Harassment of Women at the Workplace Act 2013 seeks to protect women from sexual harassment at their place of work, as the name suggests. What's sexual harassment? Sexual harassment includes unwelcome, sexually tinted behavior, whether it is direct or implied, verbal or non-verbal. It will include physical contact and advances, a demand or request for sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks, or showing pornography. Who is an aggrieved woman? Who is a woman who can make a complaint under this Act? The definition of employee under the Act is incredibly broad. So the law covers most women who come to work. It covers interns, it covers the woman who may come for 1 hour and do jhadu pocha. It covers women of any age, whether employed or not, who alleges to have been subjected to any act of sexual harassment. In relation to a dwelling place or house, a woman of any age who is employed in such a dwelling place or house can complain if she is subjected to sexual harassment. Working woman includes, as I just said, a domestic worker, a regular, temporary, ad hoc, daily wage earner, working for money or on a voluntary basis, a contract worker, a probationer, a trainee, any woman employed directly or through an agent. The Sexual Harassment of Women at the Workplace Act 2013 requires an employer to set up an internal complaints committee at each office or branch of an organization which employs 10 or more employees. Now, this committee hears and redresses complaints with regard to sexual harassment. How does an ICC work? What are the steps? First, you must report the incident within 3 months, ideally. If there's a delay of 3 more months, then you should provide strong reasons for that delay. Now, they will, not always, but sometimes, suggest that there may be a formal or informal process of conciliation. So, for example, if one person apologizes, and if it's a small enough infraction, small enough thing that has been done, then you might decide to drop it, but don't come under pressure to do so. As per section 11(4), inquiry should be completed within 19 days. The inquiry report should be provided by the ICC, the Internal Complaints Committee, to the employer and to the parties. So you have a right to the result of the inquiry report within 90 days, within a period of 10 days after the completion of the inquiry. Now, next steps. What is the employer supposed to do after the report is submitted? Now, penalties range from a written warning to an apology to compulsory counseling and volunteer work and to retention of pay and a fine. And if the complainant is unsatisfied, then she can approach the tribunal or can approach the court. Now, UGC regulations are interesting. They also seek to prevent the sexual harassment of students and women employees in all higher educational institutions that are under the UGC. So, they are a very progressive set of regulations. For example, these guidelines recognize that students of third genders are vulnerable to many forms of sexual harassment, humiliation, and exploitation. These are also stronger than the general law to prevent sexual harassment, as they recognize that the harassment can be socially compounded by caste or sexual orientation or minority identity, by being disabled or by region and class. So concern for the safety of women students under the UGC guidelines can't be cited to impose discriminatory rules for women in hostels, and that such policies shouldn't result in curtailing the freedom of women employees and students.
Okay, so before moving forward, let's quickly summarize what we have learned so far. Firstly, women have the right to equality, right to life and liberty, and the right to freedom of speech and expression. These entail various other rights that go on to protect women in all areas of life. Gender can be fluid and is one's choice based on their gender identity, expression, sex, and orientation. The LGBTQIA plus community is protected by the Indian law. Their sexual autonomy was reinstated with the decriminalization of Section 377. Secondly, various landmark judgments and amendments have come through the cases of Nirbhaya, Mathura Das, and Vishakha versus the state of Rajasthan. According to Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act 2013, sexual harassment can be verbal or non-verbal, direct or indirect, and each organization with more than 10 employees must have an ICC. Lastly, the UGC regulations of 2015 also seek to prevent the sexual harassment of students and women employees in all higher educational institutions. Okay, so now that we have come quite far in the workshop, let's move on to the next video.
Which dealt with sexual harassment and, in particular, the criminal law surrounding it. Rupan Deor Bajaj versus KPS Gill. This case brought sexual harassment to the top of public discourse. Ms. Bajaj was a senior bureaucrat. She'd gone for a dinner party to the home of a colleague. KPS Gill, the head of police at the time, who was hailed as a hero, he was called the Lion of Punjab, for quelling the separatist terrorist movement at the time in Punjab. He was also there. Here's what happened.
In 1988, I was serving as Special Secretary Finance. I had about 20,000 people under me. 90% were men. There was a dinner party hosted by the Home Secretary, and Mr. KPS Gill, who was the Director General of Police, was also there. He called out to me and he said, "Mrs. Bajaj, I want to talk to you about something." He got up and he came and stood in front of me, towering above me. He put the finger in my face like that and he said, "Up, come on, up, come along with me. Come on, you come along with me." So I said, "Mr. Gill, go away from here. You're misbehaving." And I got out from the gap in between him and me, and when I was going, that is the time when he slapped me on the bottom. That's what he did. Always people have considered it to be a very trivial thing, but I could not get over the enormity of it. Letting it go meant living with a lowered self-esteem, gulping down my humiliation, facing that person every day, facing all the other people. Consequences of complaining, I had not really estimated at that time. Nobody was willing to take up the case for me because they were so frightened of the DGP. He was the highest ranking police officer with all the powers of life and death. No one wanted to do anything against him. 17 years, long years of my life, all of it was taken up by this one case. The lower courts had quashed the case, they had thrown it out. The case reached the Supreme Court, and it was the Supreme Court which called for all the records, reinstated the matter, and also laid down, they gave the definition of modesty. They reprimanded the High Court judge and said, this cannot be treated as something trivial. All the people in every household, this was the talk between husband and wife. The limelight was not on KPS Gill. The entire focus was on me. Why have I registered a case? Must be something wrong with me. I attended the proceedings of the trial throughout, along with my husband. But on the day the verdict came, I specially requested, I said, I don't want to go there. KPS Gill was expecting to win, so they had the police band there. And then my husband's driver rang up and said, Madam, he has been convicted on both counts. It's the mindset I fought against. I never fought against KPS Gill. I fought against the mindset of a society. People have started saying now offences against women are increasing. They're increasing. No. Now more women are speaking.
The Supreme Court looked at the dictionary definition of modesty and the actions of Mr. Gill. The sequence of events indicated that the slapping of Ms. Deol Bajaj's anatomy was the finale to his earlier overtures. Considered together, this persuaded the court to hold that he had the required intention to sexually harass and sexually assault Ms. Gill. The Supreme Court then directed the Chief Judicial Magistrate to conduct a full-fledged trial solely on the basis of the evidence adduced. It was after this that the Chief Judicial Magistrate found Mr. Gill guilty of the offences punishable under Section 354, which is sexual assault, and 509, which is words or gestures that outrage the modesty of a woman of the Indian Penal Code. I was in the initial years of my practice at the time this matter was being heard by the Supreme Court. I was waiting to argue the Medha Kotwal case to enforce the Vishakha guidelines in the various states. It was inspiring to watch this. While waiting in court, I saw the sophistication with which the complex criminal law was presented to the court, and the success of that case has really left an impact on me. Now let's look at the specifics of Section 354 and 509, the provisions under which Mr. Gill was found guilty. Section 354, whoever assaults a woman or uses criminal force against a woman with intent to outrage her modesty or knowing that such an act would likely outrage her modesty can be punished with a maximum imprisonment of 2 years and or a fine. Apart from the above provision, Section 499 of the IPC also makes sexist language, which is often used online and otherwise, that is discriminatory. It can cause mental stress and harm. This offence is non-cognizable and bailable. Now, Ms. Bajaj was one of the most powerful people in her state. On the other end of the power spectrum are children who also face sexual harassment, sexual assault, and are in a far more vulnerable position. POCSO was formulated to protect children from these offences of sexual assault, sexual harassment, and pornography. It provides for special courts for the trial of such offences. It also says, very unusually, that if you know that a child is being sexually harassed or sexually abused, you have to report the offence. And if you fail to do so, then you may be punished with 6 months imprisonment and a fine. The provision doesn't, of course, apply to the child under the Act. There are other kinds of domestic violence within the home. Domestic violence as a legal term includes physical abuse, bodily harm, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, insults, ridicule, humiliation, threats of physical abuse, economic abuse or deprivation of money, monetary support. This is important. Disposal of property, getting rid of the property that you have a right to. Restriction of access to household resources or facilities, sexual abuse that humiliates, degrades, or violates the dignity of a woman. Now, the definition of domestic relationship is any relationship between two people who live or have lived together in a shared household, and these people they have to be related by blood. So it includes parents, uncles, aunts, etc., or related by marriage, or they are related through a relationship which is like marriage. So people who are, in romantic live-in relationships. Or it could be a person who is in a shared household through adoption. So are family members living in a joint family covered? Yes. Who can complain? Any woman who is or has been in a domestic relationship with the person who has committed the violence, this woman or a protection officer or any other person on her behalf can file an application to the magistrate seeking one or more reliefs under the Domestic Violence Act. The complaint can be filed against the husband and in-laws. It can be filed by a mother against her son, by a daughter against an abusive father or brother, and also a woman can file a complaint against her live-in partner. There are various orders that the court can pass in a case of domestic violence. Section 18 speaks of protection orders, so prohibiting the respondent from committing acts of domestic violence or aiding the same. Now, what does this mean? It means that you say that they have to stop beating and they have to stop helping someone else beat, for example, or that they have to stop depriving the woman of money and or another person has to stop helping that process. Section 19 speaks of residence orders, which is supporting the right of a woman to live in a shared household that is shared with the person who is accused of the domestic violence in a safe way. Now, this is very important, right? Now, Section 20 is also something that we should and we should think about and remember, because it's about money reliefs. Now, this means that any loss of earnings by the woman who was beaten, medical expenses, loss caused to property, maintenance for the person who has suffered the violence and her children can be claimed under Section 20. Section 21 speaks of custody orders with respect to the children. Section 22 of compensation orders, which is damages for injuries, including mental torture and emotional distress. Now, Section 23, power to grant interim and ex parte orders. The reason this is important is because our courts are very overburdened and sometimes the cases take a really long time. And so you want to make sure that at a very, very early stage, you get an interim relief that gives you either the money or the protection that you need. When there's a crime, the first line of the state that you deal with is the police. So what are women's rights with regard to the police? So moving to women's rights with regard to the police, let's understand it through a quick activity. Here's a hypothetical situation. You need to select the answer on the Zoom poll. A man and a woman are walking on the street and someone on a motorbike, a man on a motorbike, gropes the woman and speeds off. So if it were you, now answer honestly, right? It's anonymous. What would you do in such a situation? You can't say. You would go to the police or you would let it go. A lot of people would just let it go, and the woman would feel victimized, and that man on the motorcycle would likely do it again. Now, suppose you chose to go to the police station and file that FIR. Remember that. 1. The FIR can be filed by the woman who experienced the assault or her representative, friend, or relative. Ethically, you should have her permission, whether it's verbal or written. The complaint can also be filed by email, online, or over the telephone, but it's usually not registered, unfortunately, as an FIR. The police can never refuse to file an FIR in this situation. Now, remember that. In case of untimely registration of a complaint, so for example, if it's late, even if it's months late, even then the police can't refuse to register an FIR. If the police says that they can't lodge an FIR because it was late, you explain the delay in your complaint. Now, after the 2013 amendment in the anti-rape law, Section 166A was inserted to the IPC. So if a police officer fails to register an FIR in a complaint of sexual assault, like the man on the motorcycle, for example, or even for words or gestures that outrage the modesty of a woman, sexual harassment, trafficking, stripping someone naked, acid attacks, then the police officer who fails to register the FIR must be criminally prosecuted. In practice, the criminal prosecutions don't happen very often, but if you remember this section 166A of the IPC, if you read it, download it, everyone has a phone, you take it, you Google it, you remember it, you take it with you to the police station. In practice, often enough, knowledge of this section and pointing it out to the police has the effect of having the FIR registered. Now let's assume that the crime was committed in a particular locality. How would you decide which police station to go to? Now, a lot of people now know about zero FIR. Ideally, you would go to the police station that has jurisdiction over the area the crime was committed. Now, usually this will be the closest police station, or they'll tell you which police station to go to. It won't be very far either. If that's not possible or very difficult, remember this, that every police officer is legally bound to register the FIR of any cognizable offence committed irrespective of the jurisdiction in which the offence was committed. This is the zero FIR principle. In case it is beyond jurisdiction, the officer registers the FIR under number 0 and sends it to the police station where the offence was committed for further investigation. A woman who wants to lodge an FIR for an acid attack or sexual assault or harassment or for rape can demand to speak to a woman officer. If you feel more comfortable with a woman officer, very often you might, then just make sure that you ask for it and ask for it as a matter of right. What do you do in case the police officer at the police station refuses to file an FIR? Now, you already know about section 166A of the IPC. But you ask to speak to the SHO, the station house officer, the person in charge of the police station. That doesn't work. Under section 154.3, you could also go to the superintendent of police. And this is under the law. It's not just you going to a senior officer and asking for a favor. The law says that, look, if the officers in charge don't do their job, then the SP, for example, the superintendent of police must listen to you. In practice, though, very often, if the local police station doesn't register the FIR, and if you don't really think the SP is going to do it, the person aggrieved, usually the complainant, the woman who has suffered the harm, or the person who is filing the FIR on her behalf, goes to the magistrate, the local court, under section 156.3 of the CRPC, and they can direct the police to register the FIR. In the alternative, the magistrate can also be directly approached by way of what is called a private complaint under section 200 of the CRPC. So things to remember while filing an FIR. Consistency is of the essence. If you are filing it immediately after, you'll have all the details fresh in your mind. I think that's the biggest advantage. So make sure that you have the date, the location, a detailed description of the person if you didn't know who he was, of the circumstances, of any potential witnesses, basically all the circumstances that you can recall. People may try to hurry you. You take your time. Just remember that if you say pretty much the same thing in your initial complaint, and then later when you depose before a magistrate and in your 164 statement, then subsequently in your examination in chief and you remain consistent during your cross-examination, then on your testimony, on the strength of the truth of your testimony itself and the consistency, it's very important to remember, the consistency of your testimony, the person who assaulted you can be convicted. So when a statement is being recorded, a victim of rape has a right to record her statement in private, at her own home, or at any other place of her choice, as far as is practical by a woman police officer, in the presence of her parents, her guardians, her relatives, close friends, anyone that she feels comfortable with. What if you as a woman are accused of a crime? Now, with regard to arrest and detention, no woman can be arrested after sunset or before sunrise. And where such exceptional circumstances exist that you have to be arrested, the woman police officer shall, by making a written report, obtain the prior permission of the judicial magistrate of the first class within whose local jurisdiction the offence is committed or the arrest is to be made. In case you are to be interrogated, women have the right of not being physically present at the police station for interrogation. So, as for protection of identity, under Section 228A of the IPC, under no circumstances can the identity of a rape victim be revealed. So, neither the police nor the media can make known the name of the victim in public. If you want to waive that right, you can. It's your name. And there is only shame for the assaulter. There's obviously no shame for the victim. But it is your decision to make. And if you want to reveal your name, then you must place it on affidavit, your decision to reveal the name, and put it out in the public domain through a centrally or state recognized, a government recognized social welfare organization.
Okay, so before discussing the rights women have with regard to the police, let's do a role play activity about this. So we have heard a small example from Miss Karuna Nandi, and I would just need two volunteers, one to play as the cop and the other to play as the complainant who's trying to file the FIR. So any two people who would like to volunteer can raise their hands, and we'll take them to the panel for the activity. Any two people who would like to participate in the activity? Students, all those who want to participate in the role play activity, please raise your hands. Yes, please respond. I think, ma'am, nobody is ready to volunteer. Okay, Nikunj is asking that will it be online? Yeah, it's going to happen right now. Like, you can just come on the panel, unmute yourself, and then we'll begin the activity. So in the activity, one of the students would be acting as the cop, another as the complainant. And let's say the complainant has come to the cop to file a complaint regarding some assault or anything that has, went wrong with her or him. And we'll just see that, how the role play is going to go and where the story is going to go. And then we'll discuss about it. So we just need any two students. In fact, teachers are most welcome if they would like to participate in the activity.
Hi, Anubhuti. I think Mudit is one of the students who raised his hand. So you can just confirm with him.
Sure.
And Nikunj is also interested.
I'll just invite them to the panel.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Mudit. Hi, Nikunj. Which one of you would like to, play as the cop?
I would like to play cop.
Great. So you can play cop, and Mudit, you can be the complainant in that case. And Mudit would come to you to file a complaint regarding someone, and you just have to, like, make it seem as if you are an actual cop and this is a real situation, and how are you going to deal with it. So
So do I have to like ignore the complaint, or I have to act like an ethical cop and do
that
something that
is
a cop should do?
actually up to you. That is entirely up to you.
Okay.
Yeah, just make sure that you can portray a more realistic situation. Okay, so Mudit won't be doing it. In that case, someone else who would like to volunteer for the role of complainant. Anyone who would like to play the role of the complainant, they can raise their hands or type in the chat box, and we'll take you to the panel for the activity. Would any of the professors like to play the role of the complainant?
सोनिका, स्टूडेंट्स को बोलो कोई स्टूडेंट इसमें पार्टिसिपेट करे, क्योंकि स्टूडेंट्स ही ठीक रहेगा.
हाँ जी मैम, हाँ जी. Yes, so many girls are there. Harshita, Unnati, would you like to play the role of complainant? Tisha is also there. You can write in the chat box. I think nobody is interested. Tisha, Harshita, nobody wants to volunteer.
Okay. So, Nikunj, if you are ready, let's move forward. I'll play the role of the complainant, and we'll carry out the activity. All right.
Yeah.
So, hello, sir. I have come to file an FIR regarding a man who touched me inappropriately in a market.
When did this happen?
This happened this evening at 4 p.m.
Okay, did you know him?
No, I did not. The market was actually rather crowded, so I couldn't recognize who it was. But maybe if you can, identify the man using the CCTV footage.
So you did not see him, you just felt the touch, inappropriate touch.
Yeah.
And you want me to file an FIR for that man, which you did not see.
I did see him, but I cannot really recognize him. So basically, he just touched me inappropriately and he passed by while I was in the market.
So did you know what time did it actually happen, or you just know the appropriate time?
The time was around 4 p.m. only.
Okay, in like, you know the exact place where did it happen?
Yes, it happened in Sarojini Nagar.
Actually, Sarojini Nagar is a quite not small market. So can you be any more specific?
So it happened near the metro station where the market really starts. And I was buying something, making a purchase at the stalls, and someone just touched me inappropriately and passed by.
Okay, so do you want to like, are you sure that you want to make this thing a real thing and like want to go forward with it right now?
Yeah, I'm sure I won't find it regarding this case.
Okay, we cannot write an FIR right now, but we can start investigating like go there right now and check the CCTV footage and see what really happened? What do you like? We can go. Do you want to go around?
If you could just file an FIR and then proceed with the investigation and check the CCTV footage, that would be much better.
Okay, but I think we need a little more proof. Like, we wanna. Okay, I can fire an FIR, but let me first confirm with the CCTV footage, like it actually happened, or you just have a misunderstanding.
Okay, sure. Okay, so thank you so much, Nikunj, for being a part of this role play activity.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
So, a lot of times, a lot of you might go to file an FIR, and this might happen with you. But like we were previously seeing in the video, that a police officer cannot really deny to file an FIR, and like Nikunj, you were saying persistently that you would like to investigate first, but actually, any further investigation takes place after you have filed an FIR. So just in case if you want to, check the CCTV footage, then you must come with the lodged FIR as well. And like you have seen Ms. Karananandi say that, you have to be persistent on your case. You have to, show confidence and appear to them as, you know your rights, you know what you're doing, to make sure that not only they file an FIR, but also in, when the proceedings are further followed, then you stick to the same answers and likely you will finally find the justice. So moving forward, let's go back to Ms. Karuna Nandi to learn more about the laws pertaining to police and women rights.
Most of us, for better or for worse, live a significant part of our lives online. What if that's the space in which the crime was committed? Women, have you ever received such unwanted messages? Here's a Zoom poll, it's only for the women. I've been sexually harassed online once, 1 to 20 times, more than 20 times, not at all. Many of us are recipients of such messages on social media, which constitute harassment. Although women are the primary victims, people of all genders face this. Our online lives are, in particular ways, in some situations, as important as our offline lives. So let's talk about cyber laws and cyber safety. It becomes more important than ever. It's important to protect ourselves in cyberspace and make sure that the space is just, the space is gender equal, that you have freedom, that you have a voice. Now, even if it means just blocking someone or reporting someone's account on social media platforms, making sure that you have that freedom of speech, that you have that space in your mind, I think is really important. The more we make sure that the circumstances are such that we are not getting a lot of hate speech, we're not getting trolled online, the more we report any offenses, any hate speech, any serious trolling, the easier it is for online platforms to take action against offenders, and the more they're encouraged to do so. The right to privacy. Every person has a constitutional right to privacy. So even if a person has, for example, consented to say sexting, if you have taken a picture of yourself with very few or no clothes and you've sent it to someone, they cannot send it on. They cannot upload it. They cannot use it in any way that violates your consent. Now, keep in mind that in the online world, pictures can be hacked or phished. So that's something that would happen without the recipient's consent. So for example, if you send a picture to your boyfriend and their phone is hacked or your phone is hacked, or there's somebody finds out what their password is and gets the data that way, then the criminal offense is the offense of the person who gets the data, not the person who had it, say, in their phone and didn't pass it on. But the person who receives such pictures has the duty to not pass it on, to not upload it, to not show it to even one other person. If they do, this is a criminal offense. To understand better, let us discuss the case of the state of Bengal versus Animesh Bokshi. The case of the prosecution was that X, the woman, was in a relationship with Animesh Bokshi for 3 years. And in the course of that time, she began to trust him. Animesh had promised to marry her, and he wanted some private photos of her. She didn't feel comfortable with it, but he was being emotional, he insisted, and she provided some private photographs of herself to Animesh. Now, Animesh then demanded some nude pictures, but she denied giving such photos. He pressurized her by saying he would upload the private photos he already had on social media. Later, Animesh also took nude photos of X by hacking her phone. He then started blackmailing her and said that if she did not go for an outing with him, then he would upload the pictures and videos on the internet. When X disagreed, the woman that he was in the relationship with, Animesh uploaded the nude pictures and videos of the de facto complainant of X on a pornographic website. X, fortunately, filed a complaint, and she also submitted the printed screenshots of the videos along with the written complaint. The court found that the videos that were uploaded by Animesh contained sexually explicit acts of X, and it was from his mobile phone that those videos had been uploaded by him. So the court in detail discussed whether offences under these sections of the IPC and IT Act 2000, amended in 2008, had been committed by the accused. Animesh was held guilty for the offences punishable under, and this is important, Section 67A of the IT Act, which we discussed earlier. It is about sexually explicit acts. Section 66E of the IT Act, which is violation of a woman's privacy in a place where she expects privacy. Section 354C. Now, this is very important. This is voyeurism, right? Where you share videos, perhaps with consent, and somebody then uses them in a way that you have not consented to. Or if somebody hacks and takes those videos, takes videos or pictures, and uses them in a way that you have not consented to. Section 509 is also important here. If you remember, it's not just words or gestures that outrage the modesty of a woman, it also makes criminal invasion of your privacy under the Indian Penal Code. All of these sections and more were used to convict Animesh Bokshi. The court also defined the term revenge porn, which is the distribution of sexually explicit images or video of individuals without their consent. The possession of the material may be used by the perpetrators to blackmail their subjects into performing other sex acts, to coerce them into continuing the relationship, or to punish them for ending the relationship, or to silence them. So whenever we speak of the criminal law, or when we speak of rape, when we speak of a sexual assault, when we speak of bodily integrity, when we speak of free will, right? We use a very important word, consent. What is consent? Consent in India is at a fairly progressive level. In India, consent is at the standard of yes means yes. So it's not just when somebody tries to touch you and you say no, or when somebody has already touched you and then you say no, that touching was then valid. It has to come before the touching. So therefore, it has to be clear, it has to be unequivocal, it has to be freely given, it can be through words or gestures, and it has to be read, therefore, by the person who you are interacting with. So, of course, there may be many questions in your mind. Some of the, and not all, but some of the boys and men in this workshop may ask, well, that's not how it works. That when you're in a particular interaction, that it's not that at every stage you take consent. It's not that you, the woman says, yes, come and touch me, right? Even if that kind of interaction is happening, even if a sensual interaction is happening. Now, it's really, really important to remember that unless it is clear from the woman's words or gestures in front of you that she is consenting to the particular act that you are both indulging in, that you should back off. When in doubt, ask. It's okay. If she is saying no and you hope she changes her mind, then back off until she changes her mind. In this way, you are not just protecting yourself, you are protecting her. You are protecting the interaction. You are making sure that whatever happens, happens with a full, joyful, enthusiastic yes, and otherwise it doesn't happen. The movies that we watch and the songs that we listen to have completely distorted the definition of consent. Now, how many of you have heard this song? Tu haan kar ya na kar, tu hai meri kiran. Now, I'm convinced that it's something of my generation, but I'm told that a lot of younger people have also heard it. So, raise your hand if you've heard the song before. Of course, this movie was about a stalker. That's not how it works, right? You do not assume if she says no, then it actually means no. But if your partner is hesitating towards engaging in sexual activity with you and she says she's not sure, to comply with the Indian Penal Code, do you, 1, have to stop, or 2, can you keep touching her to persuade her? Choose an option on the Zoom poll. We've explained above what consent is, but let's put it in slightly more technical terms. Consent is an affirmative, unambiguous, clear, and conscious decision by each participant to mutually agreed upon sexual activity. Consent is voluntary and must be given without coercion, force, threats, or intimidation. So legally, consent means that when a woman communicates the willingness to participate in a specific sexual act, say she agrees to kissing, verbally or non-verbally, then it's not that she consents to participate in another sexual act that you may think flows from the first act. No. Consent is not continuous. The 2013 amendments also introduced a clause that states that a man would be said to have committed rape or sexual assault if the woman is unable to communicate consent. Now, this is important. If she is, for example, too drunk to understand what she's saying, or too high in some other way to understand what she was doing, even if what she's doing is illegal, you cannot commit an act that takes into her account a consent that she may have given when she is in that state, because it's not valid consent then. So now, what was it again? Consent is always freely given, enthusiastic, reversible. She can say yes, she may change her mind. Consent on one occasion is not consent to engage in sexual activity on another occasion. Just because I've had tea for 20 years doesn't mean that in the 21st year or 20 years in one day, if somebody offers me tea, that I have to have the tea. I can say no. It has to be informed. It has to be conscious. Consent cannot be given when someone is drunk, asleep, or otherwise incapacitated, or if their understanding of the act is affected by a physical or mental impairment. Cannot be continuous. A current or previous dating or sexual relationship by itself is not sufficient to constitute consent. So you now know enough to become an agent of change, to look within, to transform yourself and communities around you, whether they're communities of two or whether they are communities ultimately of the whole nation. We will now take a pledge. There's lots of studies that show that if you take a public pledge, or if you even write it down, that you are much more likely to follow through. I'm going to think for about 20 seconds. Please do too. And let us all take a pledge together. I take a pledge not to become jaded or exhausted or less clear about what a free world for everybody means, and to keep at this work of complete freedom for women of all shades, and to do the best that I can, to the best of my ability, to make it happen. अब समझौता नहीं. Law provides power. The power to transform relationships between people and the power to transform your relationship with the state. That happens if you act on the information. So the next stage is to act and to share. I also invite you to join the Ab Samjhauta Nahi Facebook page. As the phrase indicates, it means no more compromise.
So, thank you everyone. That was indeed an extremely interesting and informative session. Also, if you would like to share anything, you can raise your hand or just type it in the chat box. Now, before moving forward, let's hear some of your pledges. You can either type your pledges in the chat box or raise your hand on Zoom so we can help unmute you. With this, I'll take my pledge. I pledge to be respectful of all genders and exercise my rights as well as share this knowledge with others so as to enable and empower not only myself but as many people as I can. So anyone who would like to take their pledges, please raise your hand or just type it in the chat box. Also, if any of the teachers would like to address anything to the students, you can unmute yourself and do that as well right now.
Okay, so Miss Anubhuti, thank you so much. It was really a very informative talk, and I'm really grateful to the entire IT well team, especially Ms. Karuna Nandi, who's been really very good in moderating this entire session, which is very much germane to our society today. So it was really a wonderful talk, wonderful lecture. And on this platform, I would like to share that our college also has been very active in organizing such programs and events which deal with all such pertinent issues under the able guidance and leadership of our Honorable Principal, Professor R.K. Gupta sir. And in our college also, we have various cells and committees which deal with such sensitive issues like internal complaints committee and women development cell. Then we have legal awareness cell. We have amongst us the convener of legal awareness cell and women development cell, Professor Meena Sharma. So yes, ma'am.
Yes, Sonika, thank you so much. थैंक यू सो मच सोनिका। पहले तो मैं डॉक्टर सोनिका को और डॉक्टर करिश्मा को बधाई देना चाहूंगी इतनी अच्छी टॉक को ऑर्गेनाइज करने के लिए। साथ में आईटीसी विवेल को भी, जिसने जोश टॉक नाम से इस वेबिनार को रखा, आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई। आपने जिस स्पीकर्स को बुलाया, यानी कि हम बात करना चाहते हैं लर्नर करुणानंदी जी के बारे में, उनकी टॉक बहुत ही फ्रूटफुल और बहुत ही लाभकारी है मेरे स्टूडेंट्स के लिए, हमारे कॉलेज में जुड़े हुए सभी लोगों के लिए, चाहे वो टीचर है, चाहे वो विमेंस से जुड़ी हुई किसी इशू से जुड़ी हुई है, उन सब के लिए बहुत लाभकारी है। तो मैं उनको बहुत बहुत बधाई देना चाहती हूँ। मैं बताना चाहती हूँ लर्नर करुणा जी को कि उनका ज्ञान लॉ के प्रति काफी विस्तृत है, व्यापक है, और आपका ये जो ज्ञान है हम चाहते हैं सब तक संप्रेषित हो, सब इससे अवेयर हों, और इस तरह के टॉक ना केवल वेबिनार में बल्कि फिजिकल होकर बच्चों को मोटिवेट करने के लिए जरूर होनी चाहिए। इस तरह के टॉक से लोगों के अंदर एक एनर्जी आती है, इसके माध्यम से लोग अपनी आवाज उठा सकते हैं। अब टाइम आ गया है कि राइज योर वॉइस, हमें अपनी आवाज उठानी होगी, और जो संकोच करते हैं और जो अपनी आवाज नहीं उठा पा रहे हैं, उनकी आवाज हमें खुद बनना होगा। विद एग्जाम्पल उन्होंने छोटी छोटी बातों को बहुत ही सुंदर तरीके से रखा, बहुत ही अच्छी तरीके से कम्युनिकेट किया। जैसे एक बच्ची को समझाया जाता है, जिस तरह से समझाकर एक उदाहरण के साथ बताया जाता है, वो उन्होंने किया। तो इस पूरी टीम को मैं बधाई देती हूँ, और साथ में उनके लिए बात कहना चाहती हूँ कि अंधेरे में जीना छोड़, रोशनी खड़ी है। अंधेरे में जीना छोड़, रोशनी खड़ी है, तो किस्मत की बात ना कर, बहादुरी है, तेरे रूबरू तो तेरी जिंदगी खड़ी है। तो अपनी जिंदगी को पहचानना है। उन्होंने सारे लॉ के छोटे छोटे पार्ट्स को बहुत अच्छी तरह से, चाहे वो 498 हो, डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस हो, सेक्सुअल हरासमेंट एट वर्क प्लेस हो, रेप हो, स्टॉकिंग हो, इविटिजिंग हो, चाइल्ड रेप हो, पोस्को एक्ट हो, विमेंस के ऑल राइट्स पर उन्होंने बहुत ही सुंदर तरीके से बात की है। इतनी अच्छी तरीके से उन्होंने समझाया है कि हमें लॉ की जानकारी होनी चाहिए, तभी तो हम अपनी आवाज दूसरों की आवाज बन पाएंगे, दूसरों के राइट्स को समझ पाएंगे। अपने राइट को पहले समझ लें, लीगली अवेयर हो जाएं, तभी हम दूसरों को कम्युनिकेट कर सकेंगे। ये एक चेन है, एक के बाद दूसरा और दूसरे के बाद दूसरा, तभी हम एक दूसरे को मदद कर पाएंगे, तभी एक दूसरे की आवाज बन पाएंगे। मैं प्रोफेसर आर के गुप्ता जी का भी तहे दिल से बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहती हूँ इस तरह के वेबिनार के लिए, हमें परमिशन देने के लिए, मोटिवेशनल टॉक के लिए। तो पूरे कॉलेज के बिहाफ पर और इंटायर टीम के बिहाफ पर मैं तहे दिल से उनका भी धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करती हूँ। और साथ में जो ये आईटी की पूरी टीम है, उनको दोबारा से इनवाइट करना चाहती हूँ पूरे इस पे, कि फिजिकली भी आएं और इस तरह के वेबिनार करते रहें। हमारे पास लीगल अवेयरनेस सेल है, जिसके माध्यम से हम लड़कियों को मोटिवेट करते हैं। हमारे यहाँ एक पहल है जिसके माध्यम से हम उन्हें स्वाभिमानी और आत्मबल प्रदान करने के लिए, ड्राइविंग स्किल के लिए मोटिवेट करते हैं। और ऐसी बहुत सारी सेल्स हैं, जैसे मैडम ने बात करी इंटरनल कंप्लेंट कमेटी की, वो बहुत ही एक्टिवली हमारे कॉलेज में काम करती है। और किसी भी वीमेन से रिलेटेड कोई भी समस्या है तो ना केवल कन्वीनर बल्कि हमारा पूरा स्टाफ, हमारी पूरी कॉलेज की टीम, इवन चाहे वो मेल हो या फीमेल हो, बहुत ही सेंसिटिव तरीके से समझती है, जानती है, उस कंप्लेंट को सुनती है और उसे रिजॉल्व करने की कोशिश करती है। तो इंटायर पीजीडीएवी इवनिंग टीम आपका धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करती है, और आपकी इस फ्रूटफुल टॉक के लिए हम सबको मैं बधाई देना चाहती हूँ। इंटायर पूरी टीम को बहुत बहुत बधाई। पूरा पीजीडीएवी परिवार आपका धन्यवाद करता है। थैंक यू सो मच। थैंक्स फॉर दिस टॉक।
Thank you, Meena. Thank you, Sonika. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It was a great session indeed, and I hope we will all continue from
मैडम, मैं
here.
चाहती हूँ कि करिश्मा आए और करिश्मा भी फॉर्मली उसको धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करें। तो मैं इनवाइट भी करना चाहूंगी डॉक्टर करिश्मा को पूरे कॉलेज के बिहाफ पर। मैं तो लीगल अवेयरनेस की तरफ से आप लोगों से कुछ बात करना चाह रही थी, इसलिए मैंने अपनी बात रखी है। मैं डॉक्टर करिश्मा को बुलाना चाहूंगी, वो हमारी मेंबर्स हैं और वो फॉर्मली धन्यवाद करेंगे आप।
थैंक यू मैम। थैंक यू मैम। इंडीड, जैसे मीना मैम ने कहा कि बहुत ही फ्रूटफुल और इंफॉर्मेटिव सेशन था, मैं उनकी बात से पूरी तरह सहमत हूँ। एंड आई वुड लाइक टू on behalf of the PGDAV College Evening, the beneficiaries, that is the students, and even on my own behalf, I would like to extend a very hearty vote of thanks to Ms. Karuna Nandi, the speaker, Anubhuti ji, the moderator, Mitali Doshi, who was constantly supporting this presentation, and Vanshika. And apart from all of you, the other members of the ITC Vivel team for holding this webinar for our students. The Ab Samjhauta Nahi campaign is indeed a commendable effort, and I really appreciate the way you are connecting with the youth to spread awareness about gender issues, cyber security, gender equality, and other such pertinent topics. Now, I would like to take an opportunity to show my gratitude for the inspiration, encouragement, and support that we get from our principal, Professor R.K. Gupta sir. No matter how busy he is or occupied he is, he's always there. He always listens and provides us with the required guidance and support. I would also like to thank Professor Sanjay Kumar, the convener of Internal Quality and Assurance Cell, Dr. Neeta Bhatnagar, the Nodal Officer of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, Dr. Krishna Shukla, convener of Vidya Vistar Scheme, Professor Meena Sharma, the convener of Women Development Cell and Legal Awareness Cell, जिनके बारे में अभी उन्होंने आप लोगों को बताया भी, डॉक्टर पुनीत चांदला, जो कि हमारे कॉलेज में जो NSS यूनिट है उनके प्रोग्राम ऑफिसर हैं. I would also like to thank Dr. Sonika Nagpal, the event coordinator for this webinar, and other faculty members who provide their constant support whenever any event is organized by the college for the benefit of our students. And last but not the least, I would like to thank from the bottom of my heart all the students who have attended this webinar and have contributed in its success. Thank you so much, everyone.
थैंक यू सो मच करिश्मा, आपका भी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. कॉलेज बिहाफ पर आपका भी थैंक यू सो मच, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks for motivating us, inspiring us all the time.
थैंक यू सो मच सोनिका, बहुत ही फ्रूटफुल टॉक, मुझे बहुत ही अच्छा लगा इस टॉक को सुनकर. इवन मैं सुनना नहीं चाह रही थी, ज्वाइन इवन नहीं करना चाह रही थी, पर उसके बावजूद भी मैं काफी देर तक बैठकर इसको सुनती रही और समझती रही कि उन्होंने सारे, चाहे वो 354 हो, 509 हो, 506 हो, 376 हो, बहुत ही अच्छी तरीके से समझाया. मुझे बहुत ही अच्छा ये लगा टॉक, और इस तरह से टॉक दोबारा होनी चाहिए, जरूर होनी चाहिए. थैंक यू सो मच.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining today's session, and I hope we will all continue from here with the spirit of #UpSamjhautaNahi. Please feel free to email us your questions, any feedbacks or comments that you may have at knowyourrights@gmail.com, and your certificates will be emailed to you right after the session. Thank you, stay safe and stay empowered.